Well, good afternoon. I realize I'm in the hardest spot of the day between you and cocktails, right? First of all, huge thanks to CannMed for having me this week. I really enjoy the opportunity, one, to talk to folks in the industry, certainly, and who are advocating for public health and public safety. But I'll be honest, I also really love talking about all of the work that my research team does. And so on that note, I do want to explain a little bit about who I am as an introduction. I know I'm new in this space. So I am a forensic toxicologist by trade, and I am an academic researcher at Virginia Commonwealth University. I've been funded by the National Institute of Justice since 2014 and been doing research on electronic cigarettes since about 2012. And so I continue to be funded by NIJ, but I'm also funded by the Virginia Foundation for Healthy Youth, which is big tobacco settlement money. And I think I'm going to talk a little bit about the project I have with them, where we're actually evaluating electronic cigarettes or vapes that get confiscated or found on school premises across the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I've got a pretty big research team. We have about 15 this year, I think. It's hard to track who's coming and who's going sometimes, because they're students. And so I have 14 students, undergrads, master students, doctoral students, and a full-time staff person that is paid by National Institute of Justice. So that sets some groundwork. I'll be honest, my original pitch to the National Institute of Justice was that I thought about electronic cigarettes as a tool to vape other drugs. And so we were really never interested in THC. We believed that was low-hanging fruit. So we were really always concerned about methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, kids crushing up their anti-anxiety medication and putting them into the vapes, antipsychotics, et cetera, because there's lots of tutorials in drug user forums and on YouTube about how to do that. So we were always really focused on other drugs. And now I'm going to tell you the story of how we really began to align some of our work with what's happening in the cannabis industry. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here because I know you understand that there's essentially three industries. I'm in Virginia. Virginia is a medical marijuana state. In terms of what's available to consumers, we do have it is legal to grow plants in Virginia. There is no retail market for adult use in Virginia. And so really my concern with public health and public safety really did lay in the space of electronic cigarettes and vapes. And so we started working on this research before the FDA regulated the electronic cigarette. So the electronic cigarette didn't become regulated fully until 2016. And so, and that's just when they promulgated the regulations. So we're living in a space of unregulated electronic cigarette and saw a really fast proliferation of the devices and evolution of the products. So we know that policy and regulation actually supports public health and public safety. And when we have an absence of that, then we're going to see mythology and quality assurance gaps erupt. And so again, got really well versed in the space of electronic cigarettes and dealing with the mythology that was existing online and kid access. So because of what we started seeing in the cannabis industry, we started following what was happening in the drug user forums. And I think this will work just by me hitting it. Or not. All right, they're not going to play. Anyways, those are going to be videos about, one is a guy who's talking about some giving the recipe for how he makes THCP. And the other one is just a cartoon about how people are greening out when they're consuming some of these products. So my lab, because we're really well versed in analyzing electronic cigarette e-liquids, generally speaking, me and my colleagues are also forensic toxicologists and therefore analytical chemists first. And so we've been analyzing cannabis products for decades. So it was a pretty easy transition for us to start analyzing cannabis e-liquids. And so what we started seeing in about 2014, right as we were first funded, we didn't realize how far ahead the cannabis industry already was in vaping products. And frankly, the entire forensic science community also didn't know how far advanced the cannabis industry had become. And so we had other forensic tox labs and controlled substances labs in crime labs send us products to say, what are we looking at here? I don't even know how to open this thing. And so we did start following the evolution of cannabis and those innovations as they were just being used in the land of the consumers to test their products, is really what it felt like. So we did identify polyethylene glycol in the products. Shauna did a great job talking about what some of the e-liquid compositions were and what the humectants were in the early days, and the medium chain triglycerides. We're also right now following butyrated hydroxytoluene is in a lot of the cannabis vaping products now, right, where they're just looking for another diluent to put the cannabis in. And we also track flavorants regularly and also other active ingredients. So the crime labs across the United States have been dealing with crystals, dabs, and waxes for decades. And so the language isn't unusual to us. The forms of consuming the products is not unusual to us. The question usually now becomes is like in tracking the industry and what's happening with it. So in 2016, you'll see here we received some CBD products in the lab, and they had propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin was the humectants, and so that's essentially oil and water, right? And so in these formulations, the concentration of CBD was actually really low. And we're like, well, that's not much of a kick, and it's a lot of money. This is a waste of consumer dollars. This is a waste of time, we thought, to actually put these into vapes. We didn't really understand the product other than it was money making for the company who is putting these in the market. And then we saw some manufacturers just try to put CBD directly into nicotine vapes. Again, you'll see there the layers of e-liquid that developed inside of the pod itself. And so we actually stopped a clinical study in its tracks that they had gotten approved to actually use this product in the clinical study, and we just thought it was really problematic in terms of we don't know how this is working. You don't know if they're going to get the nicotine, if they're going to get the CBD. We don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be too volatile for your study. So they dropped that study. And then, of course, we saw the emergence of the MCTs, and so you'll see, compared to the other CBD products, the concentration of CBD in these e-liquids skyrocketed. No surprise here, because the cannabinoids are lipophilic. So this was no surprise to us. But I did have a number of conversations with some manufacturers, and I said, I don't understand why you're putting MCTs into the e-liquid, because why would you put a layer of oil in your lung tissue? And, usually the comment was, well, it's healthy. And it was, and I could just feel my blood pressure rise. So, in the landscape of us trying to monitor what was happening with nicotine vapes, we would do a bunch of secret shopping. We still do a bunch of secret shopping. And so we found these products from Buzz Juice. We can no longer purchase these products because the university won't let me use Bitcoin because it's the only way to buy these products now. But you'll see here that the products do not look high quality. There was not much in terms of a product description on the website. And we found we found a cannabinoid, MDB Fubinaca in these. And that's a really dangerous cannabinoid, that has been known to kill thousands of people worldwide. And so it didn't matter, what version of this we bought. It always had, the same, synthetic cannabinoid in it. And I'm not going to belabor this. We all know what's happened in the cannabis industry and the rise and the fall of hemp, and what you're going to do with that. But, we know that these stores of CBD isolate is expensive to just sit around. So of course, in terms of making sure we were getting profit here, there was, this move to convert it. And so in the early days, of course, Delta 8 was called the little sister of Delta 9 or Delta 9 Light. This is out of a vape shop out of Richmond, Virginia, where they were, across Richmond, they were saying that Delta 8 was just like CBD. Don't worry about it. It's gonna get you the feeling that you want. And so, just for full transparency, at the time, I also had a quality assurance testing lab in Richmond called Cardinal Quality Laboratories. And we had been operating for about 4 years, and paying the bills. It was my side hustle. I was still at the university. And when Delta 8 emerged in the marketplace, I came out really hard against it. And you'll see why in a little bit. In a couple of slides, I'll explain that. But it did wind up to us having to fold the company, because, we disagreed so much with what was happening in the hemp and cannabis industry, that we could no longer really stay quiet about it as a laboratory that was committed to consumer safety. So, think back to the MDMB Fubinaca that I just talked about. We got that published. It was actually really difficult to get that published. And so, for a lot of reasons. But, we got a phone call from a guy who said, "Hey, listen, I'm a grad student. Have test anxiety. Somebody told me to take Diamond CBD. I'll be frank. I am unabashed in naming this company. So, he says, I smoke a lot of weed and I have to stop smoking so much because I'm a grad student, but I need something to manage my anxiety. So I've been taking Diamond CBD. And he said, listen, lady, this is not weed. I don't know what it is. So he said, can you send it to us? We don't know where he purchased it, how he got it. So we went directly onto the website and purchased directly from the manufacturer, right? Not through a secondary distributor. And you'll see they had hundreds of products on their website. We randomly purchased. And so 4 of the products that we purchased had 5-fluoro-ADB in it, another cannabinoid that had been known to kill tens of thousands of people worldwide. And 1 product had dextromethorphan, which is the active ingredient in over-the-counter cough syrup. And so this is when I, as a scientist, I was like, why is nobody saying anything about what's happening in the cannabis and hemp industry? Because this is amoral and people are going to get hurt. Because on their website, they had a safety page that said, this is safe for your child with epilepsy. This is safe for you with lower back pain. So we got this published in Forensic Science International because 2 other journals refused to take it, called it irrelevant and unnecessary. So I'm like, well, let's just pitch it to our people. They'll take anything. So Forensic Science International published it. And what I didn't know is it came out Spain and in Europe, right? They get up before us. When I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, opened up my VCU email, I thought the VCU spam filter had fallen off of my email because it had gotten tweeted in Spain. And so, what fell out of it was somebody from the Philadelphia Inquirer, a journalist there, said, "Hey, do you mind if I go to MJ BizCon and take your manuscript to the CEO of Diamond CBD?" And I said, "Have at it, dude." So, he did, and then started a really public debate between me and the CEO of Diamond CBD. And so, he now sends his products off for targeted analysis, and you'll see this is an old certificate of analysis. And nowhere on this list are the 2 compounds that we actually found in his products. And then he later, because there's a lot of pressure now, right? Every time he said something about me, I punched up and said something about him. So he said, "Well, I know what batch she shopped out of." There's no way he could have known when and where I secret shopped. So there's no way he knew the batch, but he came out and he's like, "Oh, that batch had melatonin in it." Well, that's still not CBD. So, because he and I had this public love affair, every time he said something, I said something. So you'll see there, we got listed in a lot of public media outlets on numerous occasions. And so the unintended consequence of that was that we started receiving hundreds of samples from across the nation from people who were having adverse events. And these were people that were just trying to use a CBD product to manage anxiety, pain. They were searching for something that was a non-opioid. And these were people that didn't know where to report their adverse event. And so I became the outlet. And so I'm going to talk about some of the stories that we got here in a little bit, and the evolution of these products. So you'll see here, in the early days of us receiving these products, they were the synthetic cannabinoids, meaning the cannabimimetics. And these aren't the only ones that we received. These were the ones with some of the most compelling stories, that we thought were particularly terrifying in terms of the people didn't know where to turn, or were really embarrassed, or were afraid of being deported. You name it. There was all kinds of reasons why people didn't want to officially report these through the state. And then we started receiving in products that were just high concentration CBD or high concentration THC. And so you'll see there's 2 women over the age of 70 that were reported here. One was told by her pharmacist to take a product. The other one was told by her grandchildren. And so both of the women had wellness checks performed on them by family members after they hadn't heard from them for days. Both women were still found in a psychotic break. One woman was naked, had ripped the wallpaper off the walls, had turned over her bureaus, had thrown every dish out of her cupboards and broken them, and they were both hospitalized. So, and we searched high and low for anything but CBD and THC. And so we don't know what other medications they were on. We don't know what the other comorbidities were, but I'll tell you, we damn sure believe what their stories were. And then after the emergence of Delta 8, we started receiving, more adverse event scenarios. And so I'll talk about the one that's pictured there. This is this is testimony they actually use in Virginia's General Assembly when I testify about what a hemp-derived product actually is, and to please use better language in the legislation. So this is a honey stick, right? It's about 6 or 7 inches long, wax, right? It's supposed to be filled with honey. And so this is how the man that bought 2. And they had the label was a Post-it note wrapped around it with 45 mg-D8, right? We know what that means. He said he consumed one all at one sitting. It's a honey stick. So he consumed one, had about 4 to 5 hours of severe hallucinations, thought somebody chopped his legs off. He couldn't dial his phone because he just had bloody stumps at his wrists, 4 to 5 hours. And this is a cannabis consumer that consumes probably 4 to 5 times a day with no issues. So when he finally overcomes his hallucinations, he tracks me down and gives us the other honey stick. And I'll show you the results in a little bit. And so we also get in other kinds of issues that we have expanded our portfolio. So here's the honey stick. Those are our results, right? So it didn't have 45 milligrams of Delta-8 in it. It actually had 631 milligrams of Delta-8, 204 of Delta-9, and 953 of CBD. So this was for a cannabis user who was he was experienced. And so this is what I tell the General Assembly to make this make sense, and that we have to stop using the term hemp-derived for these products. These are synthetic, period, full stop. And so I try to explain this to the General Assembly that if we really want to believe that the Delta-8 that was in this honey stick came from plant, and if we assume that that plant makes 1% Delta-8, it usually doesn't. But if we assume that it does, give the plant the benefit of the doubt, it's a go-getter that day, then to make that single honey stick, it was going to require 14 pounds of plant material, right? So that's economically not feasible, then therefore it's synthetic. And so let's stop with the language that this is hemp-derived. It's not. It's synthetic. So I also serve on the National Safety Council. And the Alcohol, Drugs, and Impairment Division. So I became adamant that the National Safety Council is an education-based organization. It's not just about alcohol and drugs, it's all kinds of industries. And so I said, we have to start producing documents that actually support people understanding what these are, and so that they can then also go talk to their general assemblies about what these compounds are. And so this is one of the documents that we actually produced that are accessible for people to understand what these analogs are. So we started seeing, we believe, I don't know, but best I can do is assume that it's easy to make these and for the manufacturers just to do a test market in the e-liquids first, or as a wax first, and put it into a vaping device. So we started seeing the emergence of these pretty rapidly. And it took, at least for me, which I feel as though my lab has a pretty big platform, it took a while for us to make any kind of inroads into media and public safety and public health venues to understand what these products are, and particularly with poison control centers and emergency rooms that are attributing the poisonings that they're seeing to CBD and Delta-9 THC. And so I said, we've got to stop attributing these poisonings just to those two compounds, because you don't know what the person took. And as long as we continue to just attribute to Delta-9 and CBD, then it's going to confound any kind of efforts to legalize and regulate cannabis. But poison control centers, emergency departments, most laboratories cannot analyze for the array of products that can come. There's more than 200 analogs that can be made. So there's no lab that can test for all of those. And so it's difficult to do proper attribution. But what we do see, so the industry actually got really clever about this as well, right? And so there are some manufacturers who are saying, well, they can't clean them up. Why should they clean them up? So let's just say we're going to create a boutique experience, right? Where they're going to be, some's going to come on really fast and strong and hard. Some's going to last longer. How in the world do they know that? There is absolutely no idea, no pharmacological data, no toxicological data on any of these compounds. And so, right, so this is where the industry can just make up whatever they want about these products and put it on a label and manufacture it. So, this is a company that said that, look at the brown boxes are all of the labs that this company said they sent this product to for analysis. There's no way they sent their products to all of these laboratories. I doubt they sent them to even one of these laboratories, quite frankly. So you'll see there, it's supposed to be a THCO oil, and you'll see we found Delta 8, Delta 9 THCO acetate, Delta 8 and Delta 9 THC, and then CBNO. So we do a lot of work around what's on the label versus what is on the certificate of analysis. This was an interesting product where the front of the box said it was Delta 8, the back of the box said it was Delta 8 THCO acetate, certificate of analysis said it was Delta 9, and then of course we found all kinds of other things. This is a company, THCP, that says, listen, there's no lab that tests for all these, but trust us, it's in there. So we do a lot of surveillance shopping. This is the first manuscript that we pushed out about, one of the surveillance, models that we, just conducted, right, where we know that these products have a lot of compounds in them. And so, you can click those QR codes and actually get to the products. And so, you'll see there 18% contained all of the cannabinoids on the label. It's a pretty low percentage, but 66% contained the labeled plus more, and 11% didn't contain everything on the label at all. So, we've got a chart in there. We have all of our analytical methods. They're published, and they're in, open access as well. So, and this was a special issue for the cannabis industry. So we were invited to actually push, to actually publish with them, this method. So again, if you want it, track me down and I'll get you the manuscript. So I'm happy to do that. And so here's what some of that data looks like. These were products that were labeled as HHC, HHCO, or THCH. And so, those products, contained HHC, but they also contained a bunch of other cannabinoids. These products contained HHCO, but a bunch of other cannabinoids. This product was supposed to contain THCH. It didn't. It contained all the other cannabinoids. So, so when we actually think about, some of the other issues that we're seeing, we did expand our portfolio to begin looking at the microbiologicals. This is actually a product that is sold in a retail outlet, not a dispensary. And so the consumer thinks it's going to be a gummy, and it's actually plant material. We found residual solvents in these. This is paper that has been sprayed with Delta 8, and then they had a cigarette rolling machine, and so they made cigarettes out of that. So this is a product where when we opened up the baggie, we found dirt and hair actually stuck to the cookie. This was a product that was purchased in Charlottesville, Virginia is about an hour from downtown Richmond. Richmond sits right on the James River. There's always outdoor concerts there. They had purchased this 2-pack pre-roll in Charlottesville to come to the outdoor concert in Richmond. 3 girls, all smoked from the same pre-roll. One of the girls started having seizures so badly, the lead singer saw her having seizures and stopped the concert so that she could get medical attention. VCU Health System is 2 blocks away from the venue. She survived. We picked this up at a farmer's market. It's supposed to be apple cider with THC in it. How they could get away with that, we don't know, at a farmer's market in Virginia. But it didn't have anything in it, but that was one expensive quart of apple cider. I've told my students not to touch this one because we don't know what that is growing on the top of that vape pen. And this, 4-year-old died from taking mom's CBD gummies. In Virginia, the crime lab at the time could only differentiate between Delta 8 and Delta 9 THC. They didn't have any other cannabinoids in their panel. They still don't. And so we believe really that, well, from the crime lab, that it had Delta 8 in the product. So because I've got this project where we analyze vapes that get confiscated across Virginia, I just randomly selected out of several kits that we had received back from schools. We randomly selected 10. And because they're filthy, right? They live in the bottom of kids' backpacks or their back pockets, you name it. They look disgusting. So I told my team, I was like, hey, swab them and let's see what we find on them. So all 10 devices were positive for coliform. And then I thought, well, because I've received this pushback from my own community that has said, well, just because it's in the vape doesn't mean it's in the aerosol. Just because it's in the aerosol doesn't mean it's going to hit deep lung tissue. So we've got a trapping system in the lab, and so we aerosolized three of the e-liquids, and the aerosol from those 3 that were positive for coliform, the coliform was in the aerosol. Our next stage is actually to do the analysis to see if the droplets that make deep lung tissue will have coliform in them. So that's our next step. This is a product that I received. It was a criminal case. Young man was trying to stop smoking and stop vaping, and the manager of a vape store said, "Here, take this." And so when it came to us, I knew nothing about it. I tried not to know much about a case when we first start working on it. And so I received the package, and I thought it meant THC 0, meaning that it was Farm Bill compliant. And so we started analyzing it, and, analytical chemist, I don't know what that thing is. So we began unpacking it. It's really THCO acetate. So the young man took 3 gummies out of this pack. He had a semi-automatic rifle, walked out onto his balcony, shot up 2 police cars with the officers in the cars, after he consumed the gummies. I can talk about the case now because it's fully adjudicated. He definitely had a schizophrenic break. He was such a danger to himself. He was whisked away to a mental health facility that night because he was a danger to himself and the other inmates in the holding cell. He stayed essentially chemically lobotomized for about 2 years. 2 years. And so I worked with his forensic psychiatrist, who was working with him so that, to determine when he was sane enough to stand trial. Because you might imagine the police department didn't care. So he's still going to stand trial for attempted murder of 2 police officers. And so when he was finally able to stand trial, he was still heavily medicated, but he was lucid enough to be able to sit for his own trial. And he was found not guilty by reason of insanity. He believed, the story was that he walked out on the balcony with the semi-automatic rifle because he believed that he was a player in Grand Theft Auto and somebody was controlling him. That was his hallucination. This was a case we literally just received this past month from a mother whose 20-ish-year-old son had consumed this product. He would cry, hypervigilant, and then catatonic, cyclical for days. And so, so we're still in the process of analyzing it, but most of the products that we're getting in now where an adverse event is associated with it has THCP in it. Again, if you want the manuscripts, we work really, really hard to get what we find into the peer-reviewed scientific literature. So if you want the manuscripts, just let me know. I think this is one of the most terrifying pieces. This is our COVID project. And so we asked people, because I was tired of reading drug user forums about, what people were putting into their vapes. I do want to point out, you'll see there somebody was putting phenylpiracetam and CBD into their vapes. Phenylpiracetam is an antipsychotic drug that was invented by the Russians to give to their cosmonauts when they went to space. You can still find it on the black market online. Anyways, most of the people you see here were vaping THC and CBD besides, we asked what else besides nicotine. And you see a lot of herbal products in that. We also asked the context. And so you'll see there that the folks who are vaping CBD or other cannabinoids and Delta-9 THC, a significant portion of them were doing so while driving. Some of them, we got definitely feedback that it was their favorite place to consume cannabis, and also scary amphetamines as well while driving. So we do a lot of work, right? It's forensic toxicology. So we do a lot of work in drug testing, not just in workplace drug testing, but also in the military. I cannot tell you how many court-martials exist right now of our military who has been, sold the dream that it's just hemp-derived, and now they're facing court-martial. And so I've been asked to come in and testify in these cases, right? Because the military's legislation around what they can consume is actually the language is really tight. And so you'll see there, my lab is getting ready to publish that THCO metabolizes to the same metabolite as Delta-9 THC. So you cannot tell the difference. If somebody takes THCO acetate from a urine test, you cannot tell the difference between that and Delta-9 THC because it metabolizes so quickly. So that means then, therefore, that then that military person did not violate their rules because they didn't take Delta-9. They took Delta-9 THCO acetate. So there have been several people who have evaded court-martial because of my testimony in this. So, we do a lot of work around telling people to be careful around this. I'm not going to spend any time talking about the legal commentary that surrounds this because I think you're well-versed in that. And this is a QR code to our confiscated vapes project. 632 products came in last year, and the final number is 15% were THC vapes. We think that is an underestimate in Virginia because if a school resource officer believes that it is a THC vape, they turn it in for evidentiary purposes. They don't send it to us. So we think 15% is an underestimate. 100% of that 15% were the THC analogs, indicating the accessibility of these products to children. One was in an elementary school. We've talked a lot about market mythology, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that, but we do know that the synthesized THC analogs are a significant problem, not just to public health and public safety, but I really do believe it is really going to be detrimental to efforts to legalize and regulate cannabis. So on that note, we know that the industry is constantly evolving, and the one that really sticks with me the hardest is that I've talked to many people here about the value of getting whatever it is that you're finding into the peer-reviewed scientific literature, because blogging about it and social media about it is not enough when we're trying to push back against mythology. Because when me as a scientist comes forward, and with validated and methods and a research engine that has been going strong for 15 years, I am the idiot, right? Because the industry has already been out front with their own messaging and their own control of the narrative. And so the only way really to elevate the conversation, as much as this peer-reviewed scientific literature and publishing is difficult and asinine all at the same time, it is the bastion of the scientific voice that legislators and regulators really lean into to make good policy. And it amplifies our message into the right spaces. So we have to figure out how to work together. I've told my own colleagues in forensic science, and as a forensic toxicologist, I never thought I would say this, but that we have to legalize, we have to regulate cannabis. And that is for public safety purposes, as much as it is giving access to people who need it, as much as it is also as well as allowing adults to use a product that they want to use, and making sure they have high quality products for that. So on that note, I know I'm a little bit over. I'm going to hang out. I know I'm in the tough spot. I know you want to go for cocktails, but I'm going to hang out for a little bit and answer any questions. I'm happy to take one or two now. I'm funded by NIJ. I've got a colleague on my team with NIH, the foundation, of course. And I've got a really great team of young people behind me that are really the ones doing the work. And they are publicly supported. And if I can make any other pitch, it is that we have to talk to our representatives about supporting research and not cutting it at the federal level, because these young people need this kind of training. So on that note, thank you to CannMed for having me. Thank you for hanging out with me. I'll take a question and then you can hang out with me later.
Hey, Michelle. Willie McKinney here.
Hi, Willie.
Hey. First of all, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for what you do and shining light on some of the issues that are out there. You talked about the impact of terminology. You mentioned hemp-derived as a terminology that is misleading, so to speak, and synthetic. You may have mentioned, I don't recall, but I know natural is another one of those terminologies where if it's natural, even if it's venom, snake venom, it's good for you, right? There's one that I'm not popular. I always bring it up. Medical marijuana. Yeah. Is there such a thing? And can you comment on that? And does that drive some of the consumer comfort with some of these products, because they assume that some regulatory authority has reviewed these products?
Yeah, I think so. I'll speak to Virginia, right? Virginia, hugely conservative. And I know that the term medical marijuana in Virginia was a pathway and is still seen as a pathway for adult use legal retail in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so I do think the term medical marijuana does make it more palatable for a lot of regulators, predominantly really legislators. So I think the hope was that there was going to be a pathway for adult use. With current administration, that's clearly not going to happen. I think there's some hope about the governor's race coming, and what that's going to look like. But I think in Virginia, there are products in the dispensaries that are not made in Virginia. And there are some concerns about that. And I think there's also some concerns, and I've read the literature that maybe there's not always a positive outcome for patients and really, really high dosing programs. And so having the term medical in front of that maybe, subverts some of the issues that might come with some of the products that are actually in the licensed dispensaries. But I think right now nobody's really splitting any of those hairs. And so I think that term medical has just become a pathway to get to adult use legal in Virginia. Did that answer your question?
I have one. All right. Megan Bang, I'm a registered nurse. Thank you so much for this.
Of course.
I know that the other day on the panel, you said you're not seeing anything like laced with fentanyl. I just want to share a story and get your insight on it. We recently had a mom who was concerned her 18-year-old bought some THCA diamonds from a Texas hemp shop. Yeah. She sent it to a lab for testing, and it tested positive for methamphetamine and negative for THC. And just wondering, and we called the lab to verify that, their testing methods and everything. Have you seen anything?
We have, in our latest surveillance shopping, we've purchased some of those diamond products. And so we've not analyzed them yet. We're right now in the process of documenting. We do a lot of documentation in terms of, what does the package say? Is there a certified is there a COA? What does the website say? So we're in the process of documenting all of that right now before we even open the packages. And so I'll be honest, based on other things that I've seen, it doesn't surprise me at all that, those crystalline-like objects are not THC or THCA or, anything near to that. It's not uncommon for us to see other products like that. So for instance, we purchased a product in an opaque envelope that was supposed to be a hemp product. And when we opened it up, it was a mushroom, and the mushroom was sprayed with a synthetic hallucinogen. So, so we live in the space of don't ever believe, what's on the label or what actually the authenticity of the actual thing.
Do you know of any other states doing similar studies like what you're doing of confiscating and analyzing those vapes?
Not as widespread as what we're doing it. We know that there is one lab that is working with local schools and the local law enforcement to analyze the vapes. We know that, and that's just at a very local level. We know that Rutgers University has a program through the FDA's Center for the Study of Tobacco Products or Tobacco Products Program, or which now no longer exists because of federal cuts and DOJ. So I don't know what happened to the Rutgers program, but they were not doing an analysis they were literally just collecting what got confiscated and measuring them and taking pictures of them. They were not doing any analysis whatsoever and was told they would not do any analyses on the products. So we think that, there's maybe only one other place that's also doing something that's been requested by the local school system. So we're trying to do this more widespread. We're collecting lots of data about it. We actually have an IRB to do this. So no product can get traced back to a school system, cannot get traced back to an administrator or a child. And so we split the Commonwealth of Virginia into its 5 health districts, and we're reporting the data out by health district. We've had a huge learning curve to get the schools to trust us. This is completely free for the schools. I send kits out to them, and we generate quarterly reports with what we found. We try to get that information as close to the time of confiscation as possible, because we think that you cannot make good policy unless you have immediate data. And so most research arcs are you don't report the data until 2 to 3 years after the thing happened. And so we work really hard to get that data back to the schools as quickly as possible. And we're happy to collaborate with other states. Yes, ma'am.
Is it your belief, and this may be a naive question, that the manufacturers are doing this intentionally or unknowingly? And then part 2 to that question, I don't know if there is a way that facilitates the manufacturers being directly informed once the studies have been complete, but if they do become informed, have you been contacted by any and sent follow-up products and in a situation where they say, hey, we've reevaluated our process, we've reformulated and we're trying to remove this, and here's what we came up with. Is it better now?
Oh, in terms of, are they intentionally putting these synthetic?
Yes.
Yeah, we believe 1000% that it is completely intentional. And so some of it is that, we think that the cooks are messy. And so, we're only reporting like the big guys. We're not reporting all the ISOs and we're not reporting out all of the junk that also gets generated. We're landing in the space of, all right, of the big guys that get named, right? The big cannabinoids that get named. And so, we think they're dirty cooks anyways, generating lots of compounds. But we also think they're probably also just reusing the same pot that they're making it in, right? And they never clean it out in between. So that also generates a pretty ugly mixture. We have started receiving in a handful of product. Well, it's not a handful. We're receiving products where it looks like they're taking the time to create either a cleaner cook or they're purifying, because it looks like there's just fewer cannabinoids, generally speaking, in some of the products that we're getting. So we absolutely believe it's intentional. There's very low concentrations of delta-9 THC, usually no CBD. So we think it's intentional. Yes.
Hello. Okay. I have a question because you're looking at the products and you're looking at the kind of that piece, but since you are in the forensics world, I'm guessing you're also exposed to the human parts of it.
Yes.
Is anyone actually kind of corroborating human data and looking for synthetics in the actual human?
Right. So we've actually received a number of cases in which there was a hospital admission. And so we can't, the person or the hospital has not been willing to give us the biological that got collected so that we can analyze for that. One of the biggest challenges around all of these is that from an analytical perspective, you analyze the metabolite. You look for the metabolite in the biological. And we don't know what those are for these compounds. So our project that's funded by the NIJ is to, we've bought certified reference material and we are cooking it with human microsomes, right? So that we can find biomarkers from the metabolic process to know what metabolites we can look for to be markers for these compounds. And we are, once we do that, we will, and they don't have certified reference material, they won't. But we can at least monitor for them in our analytical method. So then we're now building this analytical method that has the parent compound in it, and we're going to be monitoring for the metabolites that we identify. And then we're going to give all of that to the Washington, D.C. Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, who houses the forensic toxicologist there. And we're going to run all of their postmortem samples and all of their DUIs just to see what the prevalence is. And that's where we've been doing our surveillance shopping to know what products are in the D.C. marketplace.